The Senate will come to order. Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. President. I impose a call of the Senate.
The Senate is now under call. Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that further proceedings under the roll call be dispensed with, and that the Sergeant-at-Arms be instructed to bring in the absent members.
On that motion, all in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The motion prevails. Members, if you'd be so kind as to stand. In our tradition, we start with prayer, and today's chaplain is Reverend John Herlinger from Gustavus Adolphus Lutheran Church in St. Paul. As a gentle reminder, following the prayer, please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Good morning. Before I begin to pray, I'd like to mention my prayer includes words from a hymn from our hymnal called Build a Longer Table, written by David Bjorlin. We pray. God of all nations, we thank you for another day surrounded by your love and guidance in all we do. We celebrate the vast diversity of people that call Minnesota home and make this great state what it is. God of all nations, I thank you for these elected leaders and the important work you have called them to do, as well as all us Minnesotans who have been tasked with the call to love our neighbors as ourselves. May we be challenged to build longer tables, not higher walls. Feed those who are hungry, making room for all. Build a safer refuge, not a larger jail, where the weak find shelter. Mercy will not fail. God of all nations, lead each of us now in the work that is before us. Let the decisions we make and the work we do reflect our love for our neighbor, our care for the vulnerable, and our dedication to justice and peace for all fellow Minnesotans. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The secretary will take the roll.
Abler, Anderson, Barr, Bolden, Carlson, Champion, Clark, Coleman, Swadzinski, Dames, Dibble, Dornick, Draheim, Drazkowski, Duckworth, Eichhorn, Farnsworth, Fateh, Frentz, Green, Grunhagen, Gustafson, Hochschild, Herr, Hoffman, Housley, Howe, Jasinski, Johnson, Johnson-Stewart, Klein, Curran, Kroon, Kunish, Kupec, Lang, Latz, Liskey, Limmer, Lucero, Mann, Marty, Matthews, May-Quaid, McEwen, Miller, Mitchell, Mohammed, Murphy, Nelson, Verbaten, Pappas, Pa, Port, Pratt, Putnam, Rarick, Rasmussen, Rest, Seeberger, Utke, Weber, Wiesenberg, Westlin, Westrom, Wickland, Zhang.
Members, a quorum is present. Members, for clarity, the following members intend to vote from a remote location pursuant to Rule 40.7, Senator Anderson and Senator Miller. Members, if I could have your undivided attention. Members, if I could have your undivided attention. It is an honor for me to recognize and welcome some very special guests this morning. 3 members of the Norwegian Parliament are with us. Mr. Lars Harbrekken, who is a member of the Socialist Left Party. Mr. Wilfred Norlund, member of the Center Party. And Mr. Bård Leuven Torheim is with us. If you'll wave your hand, these are our guests for today. If you get an opportunity, please go over and meet them. But I want to say on behalf of the Senate, we appreciate your visit and the opportunity to strengthen the bond between Minnesota and Norway. So it is an honor to welcome you to the Senate floor. So thank you for being here with us today. Now, usually I would have them applaud, but we do not applaud on the Senate floor, but we'll certainly give you a virtual hug right now. So thank you so very much. With that being stated, thank you so very much. And members, you can feel free to go over and say hi also. But if you want to follow along with me today, I'm reading from the Senate agenda. Today is Thursday, February 27th, 2025. We will begin with the second order of business, which is the executive and official communications. The following communications were received. Please make note as no action is required. Members will now proceed to the fifth order of business, which is the report of committees. Senator Murphy for a motion to adopt the committee reports.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the committee reports printed in the agenda be adopted.
Any discussion? Seeing none on that motion of the committee reports, all in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The motion prevails. Members, we will now proceed to the eighth order of business. That is the introduction and first reading of Senate bills. The bills listed on today's introduction calendar are given their first reading and referred as indicated with the following changes. Members, the first change is on page number 2. You'll see Senate file number 1870. That bill has been referred to the Committee on Health and Human Services. On the same page, you'll see Senate file number 1876. That bill is referred to the Committee on Commerce and Consumer Protection. As well, on page number 2, you see Senate file number 1877. That bill will be referred to the Committee on Commerce and Consumer Protection. If you then go to page 11, you'll see Senate file number 1959, and that bill has been referred to the Committee on Agriculture, Veterans, Broadband, and Rural Development. On that same page, you'll see Senate file number 1963. That bill has been referred to the Committee on Commerce and Consumer Protection. You'll then go to page 14. On page 14, you will see Senate file number 1993. That bill has been referred to the Committee on Labor. If you go over to page 15, you'll see Senate file number 2001. That bill has been referred to the Committee on Health and Human Services. And then if you go to page 18, you'll see Senate file number 2026, and that bill has been referred to the Committee on Elections. And last but certainly not least, if you look at Senate file number 2027, that bill has been referred to the Committee on Education Policy. As I mentioned, members, all the bills listed on today's introduction calendar are given their first reading and referred as indicated with the highlighted changes. Members, will now proceed to the ninth order of business. We will adopt the author's motion all as one motion. All in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The motion prevails. Members, we now have some individual senator motions. I'm going to start with Senator Seeberger. Senator Seeberger, for your motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. My first motion is I move that Senate File 549 be withdrawn from the Committee on Capital Investment and returned to its author.
On that motion, all in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The motion prevails. Senator Seeberger, you have another motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that Senate File 550 be withdrawn from the Committee on Capital Investment and returned to its author.
On that motion, all in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The motion prevails. Senator Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that Senate File number 1676 be withdrawn from the Committee on Higher Education and be re-referred to the Committee on Health and Human Services.
And Senator Hoffman, did you or your staff talk to the committee chairs?
Mr. President, the answer is yes.
With that being said, Senator Hoffman moved that Senate File number 1676 be withdrawn from the Committee on Higher Education and re-referred to the Committee on Health and Human Services. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The motion prevails. Members, Senate Resolution 15, numbers 15 and 16 will be referred as indicated and no action is required. Remaining under motions and resolutions, Senator Murphy to designate special orders.
Thank you, Mr. President. Pursuant to Rule 26, I designate the following be made special orders for immediate consideration. Members, the list is on your desk.
Members, as Senator Murphy so eloquently stated, the special orders list is on your desk. We're going to begin with Senate File number 571, which is Senator Westlin. Senator Westlin.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. Senate File 571 deals with the Uniform Trust Code and the Uniform Probate Code, which I know are riveting topics for everyone in this body. Minnesota's Trust Code was last overhauled in 2015, and over the past 10 years, the Bar Association has monitored appellate court decisions, developments in other states, and technical issues that have arisen with our Trust Code. After careful study, the Bar Association has recommended updates to the Trust Code as well as a handful of related changes to the Probate Code. Some of the notable changes in the bill include that it will lengthen the amount of time that a trust can exist. At least 35 other states have extended their maximum duration of trusts, and this bill sets a time period that is roughly the median of what the other states' maximum durations are. This bill will clarify the duties and responsibilities for different parties in directed trusts, which was a new concept we adopted in 2015. Instead of relying on a single trustee, directed trusts allow multiple people with special expertise to fill specific roles such as managing investments or handling distributions. The bill makes sure their fiduciary responsibilities are clear. The bill further increases the size of a trust that can be terminated without a specific court proceeding from $50,000 to $150,000. This does take some of the pressure off of our courts having to deal with small trusts that don't make sense to operate as trusts any longer. The bill further modifies our current statute that bans estranged parents from inheriting from their children. While this prohibition currently only applies when a child dies as a minor, this bill will expand that prohibition to cover adult children's estates as well. The bill makes some changes to bring Minnesota more in conformity with the Uniform Trust Decanting Act. Decanting is the process of moving assets to a new trust to benefit the beneficiaries of an existing trust. And finally, Mr. President and members, the bill codifies a handful of recent appellate court decisions that construed various elements of the revised trust code. The bill conforms with those opinions to keep our statutes and case law aligned. And finally, Mr. President, I would say I appreciate the fact that this bill does have bipartisan authorship. I appreciate Senator Cruen signing on as a co-author on this bill. The changes proposed in this bill were carefully studied and vetted by the Bar Association and have been adopted by them and proposed in this bill. We did have a thorough hearing in the Judiciary Committee, and members, I would appreciate your support, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Senator Westlin. Any other discussion on Senate Files 571? Senator Cruen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in support of this bill and thank Senator Westlin for bringing it forward. It's a good bill. It's been thoroughly vetted by the Minnesota State Bar Association Probate, Trust, and Estate section. The way that process works is very thorough. You get a lot of smart lawyers that practice in that area to come together to produce nonpartisan solutions and update our codes from time to time. And this is one of those bills. We had a thorough presentation on this in Judiciary. It was not controversial, and I urge members to support this bill and vote yes. Thank you.
Any other discussion on Senate File number 571? Any further discussion? Seeing none, the Secretary will give the bill its third reading.
Senate File number 571, a bill for an act relating to trusts, modifying various provisions of the Uniform Trust Code, powers of appointment, and the Uniform Probate Code.
Third reading. Any other discussion before we take a roll call vote? Seeing none, the Secretary will take the roll.
Mr. President.
Senator Jasinski, those voting pursuant to Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Anderson votes aye.
Senator Anderson votes aye.
And thank you, Mr. President. Senator Miller votes aye.
And Senator Miller votes aye. All senators having voted who desires to vote, the secretary will close the roll. There have been 64 ayes and 0 nays. The bill is passed and its title agreed to. Members, we will now go to Senate file number 1552, Senator Kupec.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have Senate File 1552. You may or may not, depending on how good your memory is, remember this bill because we've actually passed this bill previously off the Senate floor last year. Unfortunately, when it came back from conference committee, it was not in the final bill. So I'm carrying this bill this year as a standalone with the hope that we can make this change quickly to make the life easier for some small grain purchasers within our state. And just like any piece of legislation, not to say that things cannot be improved a little bit, Mr. President, I do have the A1 amendment.
Senator Kupec offers the A1 amendment. The secretary will report the A1 amendment.
Senator Kupec moves to amend Senate File number 1552 as follows. Page 1, line 8, after prepared, insert. This is the A1 amendment.
Senator Kupec to your A1 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. The A1 amendment does basically about 3 things. It makes one small technical change in writing. It does reinstate on page 2, lines 1 through 4. This will require that grain buyers or actually sign off. The boards for elevators have to sign off on that. This is something that I worked with Senator Dames on in putting that back in. And then on page 2, it changes the amount there from $20 million down to $17.5 million. And I'll be happy to discuss that when we go back to the main part of the bill.
Any other discussions on the A1 amendment? Any other discussions on the A1 amendment? Seeing none, all in favor of adoption of the A1 amendment, say aye. All those opposed say no. The motion prevails and the A1 amendment is adopted. Senator Kupec.
Thank you, Mr. President. So to the bill itself here, what we are doing is we're trying to help out grain buyers here who are particularly our smaller ones. In our committee, we had somebody, a constituent from my district who came up, a very small grain buyer, just about $500,000. The way the law stands right now, he would have to get an $18,000 audit, something that is a little bit beyond the finances for him. So what this bill does is it does a few things. It says if you only make under $7.5 million in sales, that you can use a tax attorney or an accountant or a CPA if you want. You can still do that. If you're 7.5 up to 17.5 now with the A1 amendment, then you can have a CPA. Will have to look over your stuff, and then if you're above $17.5 million, it does require you to get a full CPA audit. It also makes a couple of changes in wording to talk about international accounting standards, because a lot of grain purchases that go through Minnesota actually go to foreign countries, so we needed to just kind of make that change. And also talks about, too, if you're just a cash grain buyer, there's no risk here. Your grain is not, you're paying cash, that you can also just avoid this by if you're just using cash. So that is in essence the bill.
Any other discussion to Senate file number 1552 as amended? Senator Westrom.
Mr. President, would the author yield?
Senator Kupec, will you yield? He will yield. Senator Westrom.
Mr. President, Senator Kupec, before I make some comments, I just want to clarify on the amendment. What we're adding back in, my understanding is that the co-op board members would have to sign off on the audit or the financial review just to, as current law requires. We've added that about 5 years ago, but is that my understanding correct, Senator Kupec?
Senator Kupec to the question.
You are absolutely correct, Senator Westrom.
Senator Westrom.
So, Mr. President, thank you, Senator Kupec. I think that's just a common sense and a good little check. So the board is tuned in with the management, and you don't have just a silo manager going off and turning over the reports, and the board members just signing off or just ratifying them without signing on them. So, members, I think this is a good bill. It brings the balance back. If you remember, some of the changes we put in place was before we had a grain indemnity fund in Minnesota, and the idea is to have some more responsible oversight of elevators, where we had a situation in my district, and there's been others throughout the state. Thankfully, not that many, but the Ashby elevator about 5, 6, 7 years ago had a situation where the manager had manipulated the books. The board wasn't aware of it or fully aware of it, and so that led to one of the reasons we changed to say the board members should be signing off on this, because when you sign your name as a board member or to any document and you've got some fiduciary obligation, there's just a new level of interest you take in what you're signing, and all of a sudden you might be on the hook for. So, Senator Kupec, I think that's a helpful piece of legislation to keep in place, as we don't want elevators to go under because of mismanagement or shenanigans or financial fraud in many cases of bilking the farmers out of their grain, that they instead of bringing your money to a bank, farmers bring their grain to an elevator, which is their money in many cases until they sell it. And so they want that grain to be safe. And so this is, I think, finding a good balance, but helping those small elevators and grain buyers. I've got some in my district I know that have talked to me about this, and the changes will help them be able to have a more reasonable financial review of a business that maybe is in the few millions, but not in the tens of millions, which is always a more opportunity for a bigger loss for farmers, and that's why we have a stronger audit review the bigger the business is, because the calamity or the crisis could be much bigger if somebody got away with fraud or mismanagement that wasn't caught. And so the whole idea is, let's catch it early. If there's a mistake or other reasons that it's not going well, and we want to make sure the farmers are safe when they bring their grain, their harvest in, and store it in the bank, quote unquote, known as the elevator.
Any other discussion on Senate file number 1552 as amended? Seeing none, the Secretary will give the bill its third reading.
Senate File Number 1552, a bill for an act relating to agriculture, modifying financial reporting requirements for grain buyers.
Third reading. Any other discussion before we go to the Senate author as the last voice? Senator Kupec.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a very good bill. This is exactly the kind of people that we are trying to help here, I think, particularly those small elevators, small farmers. This will be a bonus. I want to thank Senator Westrom, Senator Dornick, Senator Dames, Senator Putnam for helping along with this bill and making it a better bill. So thank you.
The Secretary will take the roll on Senate file number 1552 as amended. Senator Jasinski, for those voting pursuant to Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Anderson votes aye.
Senator Anderson votes aye.
And thank you, Mr. President. Senator Miller votes aye.
And Senator Miller votes aye. All senators having voted who desires to vote, the secretary will close the roll. There being 66 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. Members, we will now proceed to Senate File Number 1075. Senator Howe.
Thank you, Mr. President. And members, Senate File 1075 is a bill to exempt those with a permanent prescription for window tint from the 2-year expiration requirement that was enacted in 2008. This came to me by a constituent that in 2021, Patty Sutherland suffered a traumatic brain injury from a fall. And she was given a prescription for window tint, and as required by statute, at the time was given a prescription, and it said it was good for a lifetime. Patty's husband was familiar with the window tint statute as he was a state trooper, and at the time he retired in 2006, this would have met the required law. In 2008, the statute was amended to require that all prescriptions had to be renewed every 2 years. In August of 2024, Patty was stopped by law enforcement and was told when she provided the prescription that that prescription was no longer valid because it went past the 2-year requirement. It took Patty 6 months to get an appointment with her neurologist to get an updated prescription. This was a waste of Patty's time, the neurologist's time, and it increased our health care cost. Members, this bill is a common sense bill that reduces the bureaucratic hurdles for those that have permanent conditions and need the window tint. Thank you, Mr. President.
Any other discussion on Senate File Number 1075? Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I just wanted to let the chamber know we had a good hearing and a good discussion on this subject in the Transportation Committee, and I'll be supporting this bill. I would encourage others to as well. And just wanted to mention, one of the points of discussion that came up that we're going to get to, hopefully at some point in the not too distant future, is helping those folks who do receive this exemption, so that they can enjoy the benefit of tinted windows because of the medical necessity, avoiding being pulled over unnecessarily, so somehow or another allowing law enforcement to know that the car that they see with the tinted glass has this exception. They don't need to pull it over through some mechanism, either through technology that's connected to the license plate or a sticker or something like that. So that might come up as a question for you today. We have had that discussion, and we're going to continue talking about some solutions to that idea. Thank you, Mr. President.
Any other discussion on Senate File Number 1075? Senator Westrom.
Mr. President, Senator Dibble, appreciate your comments. Senator Howe, but maybe raises the bigger question. I certainly will support this bill, but maybe we should just, Senator Dibble, get rid of the window tint restrictions so people can drive if they want tint on their windows. They can. If they don't have to. I've got a situation, a constituent that was pulled over driving a Ford vehicle that came out of the factory with window tint, and they were still pulled over and told by the officer here in Minnesota that their windows were too dark. I find it hard to believe that Ford would be sending out windows tint from their manufacturers that are not in compliance with state laws, but it brings up the question that maybe we should just get rid of the window tint statute, and Senator Dibble, maybe that's something you guys can work on with the issue you're talking about. Senator Howe, thanks for bringing this forward, though. Let's fix it for your constituent.
Any other discussion on Senate File Number 1075? Seeing none, the Secretary will give the bill its third reading.
Senate File Number 1075, a bill for an act relating to transportation, modifying requirements for the exception to window glazing requirements.
Third reading. Any other discussion before we go to the author for his last words? or closing comments, I should say. I shouldn't say his last words. That
Mr.
could
President,
be pretty dangerous there, Senator Howe.
Mr.
Senator
President,
Howe,
I thought you had something more in store for me there. But,
oh, yeah, only if you're wearing those ostrich boots.
So,
Senator Howe.
in the tradition of Senator Tomassoni, good bill, vote green.
With that being said, the Secretary will take the roll for Senate File number 1075. Senator Jasinski, for those voting pursuant to Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Anderson votes aye.
Senator Anderson votes aye.
And thank you, Mr. President. Senator Miller votes aye.
And Senator Miller votes aye. All senators having voted who desires to vote, the Secretary will now close the roll. There being 66 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed and is titled agreed to. Members, that is it for our special orders calendar. We will now proceed to the 13th order of business, announcements of Senate interest. Without objection, the following senators will be excused from today's session. Senator Pratt. Members, I'd like to also call to your attention that on your desk when you came in that you saw that we have the updated temporary rules. So we hope that those will be of good use to you. Any other announcements of Senate interest? I'm now going to call on Senator Johnson. Senator Johnson. Senator Johnson is going to have some additional words in order to welcome the Norwegian Parliament delegation. Senator Johnson.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Really appreciate the opportunity to welcome the delegation from the Norwegian Parliament. Minnesota has so many connections with Norway, a lot of history with them. Currently, over 800,000 Norwegians, or those who have Norwegian background, live here in the state of Minnesota. And so it's really an opportunity to touch back with our roots and have these guys come in here and be part of this process here at the legislature. If you look over here in the corner, we have another Norwegian, famous Norwegian, who was here during the early days, Knut Nelson, who came from up in Fergus Falls area, born in Norway, came through Wisconsin, came here and did a lot of work in Minnesota as a senator, as governor, and worked in the legislature as well. But he's just one of the many that came from Norway and was really ingrained in the reason why this state is the great state it is from people like that. And we just really want to thank those who came and visited us and the contributions you have made with this relationship and this friendship between Minnesota and Norway. So welcome and thank you for coming.
And just a couple other comments about it before I go to Senator Rest. Minnesota, from my understanding, is home to the largest population of Norwegian Americans in the United States with deep cultural and ancestral ties to Norway. Norwegian immigrants played a significant role in shaping Minnesota's communities, economy, traditions, and particularly in agriculture, education, and civic engagement. But on a lighter note, we both have the love for the Vikings. Norway had the real Vikings, and of course, Minnesota has our ever hopeful Vikings football team. So we appreciate you being here. Thank you so very much. Senator Rest.
Thank you, Mr. President. Two announcements. One of them is certainly about Norway. I had the privilege of being an exchange student when I was high school, some 60-some years ago. But Norway and Oslo and the North Sea and the island that I lived on remain very dear to my heart. In addition, my second announcement is next Tuesday is Mardi Gras. And we will again be celebrating Mardi Gras in the conference room of the tax suite starting at 8:30 in the morning. The Taxes Committee will not be meeting, and all of you are invited, and your friends and the staff, if you are not otherwise engaged. Let the good times roll.
Any other announcements of Senate interest? Any other announcements of Senate interest? Seeing none, Senator Murphy for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. It is the case that the Senate celebrates Mardi Gras far superiorly to the House of Representatives. I look forward to our celebration. And with that, Mr. President, I move that the Senate do now adjourn until March 3rd at 11 a.m.
On that motion, any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The motion prevails and the Senate is now adjourned.